Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Danielle. That was fantastic, really. I love that. So I'm going to read from this new book of mine, Coda. And I'm just, essentially, it continues through. It's a sort of a single arc. It's separated by roughly some kind of trailing off point between the aphoristic paragraphs, as it were. They're connected to each other, but they don't flow directly into one another. Anyway, so I'm just going to read, and then I'll be done.
Painless.
Yes, let's hope. I mean, I have most of the members of my family would assure you that this is also a really good work for the insomniac, as a kind of extraordinary soporific. And feel free to laugh. Also, it's supposed to be funny sometimes, also sometimes not. Okay, you can figure it out. All right. Only one who is a party to the hoax can really judge. And as a party to the hoax, one cannot judge. Hence, there is no possibility of judgment in the world, only a glimmer of its promise, of its always nearing surface, nearing viewpoint, nearing level ground. But even this conjecture, this deduction of the principle, does nothing to deter the persistency of the drive, and by implication finds every dispositive in bolstering the claim no more or less than equal to the field on which it's salted. A sophistry that substitutes the predicate of one trope for the subject of another, as though the idiom it manifests were not that of a speaker, but merely some mute rumor of a common cause. To whom that voice conducts its call for what it has been spoken, no presently conversant drone can typify an insight set beyond this severed testament, at once our pilot fantasy of being in ensemble, and the temporal luxation of a gape-mouthed argumentum ex silentio. If only I'd considered taking on some other purpose, perhaps a more direct approach, a second pass around the track, and having done so countless times, could near the final moments of another journey to the ends of the earth, imagine what I might have been and how I'd have revealed it. But I've done nothing of the kind, or perhaps I have done only that. I know both conclusions are somehow true and issue from the same order of premises, excepting my attempts to argue either are unlikely to seduce my addled patrons to a side. I faced more grandiose corruptions in my time, and I expect the thought propitiates a feeling of repugnance in those I have entrusted with this winding sheath of cringing gas and hobbled aspirations, those who've found release before its general flow was forced to form the recapitulation of a coda or a preface. For now, I will petition you to pardon the discourtesy of the sentiment, and I do so with no small regret, but I won't take in another lost orphan, having thoroughly committed to the nurture of the wastrel already in my care, to thee, if it's not obvious by now, and thee alone. I've never thought myself a hero or a saint, nor a martyr in defense of my unseemly proclamations. At best, I cling to the position arbitrarily and with a vulgar counterpoint, to pass off mere decree as well-reasoned syllogism. At worst, I pose a fealty neither acted on nor felt, the sort that I've refused when others have adduced the disposition in considering my aspect. Of objections to my pleasure in proposing such opprobrium, I offer this riposte. I am as generous with my possessions as I am eager to possess them. What reason to reveal a zealous kindness or an obsequious antipathy, by which I might allege a mastery of artifice and disguise? What reason when there's nothing but this pretense to the making of the subject so derided as contingent, as randomly encountered and haphazardly devised? Having nothing, I say again, I'm munificent with everything I have. That the nothing I have is so much more than the nothing I want, or the nothing by which other outcast revelers are readied and impressed, well, we've hit upon the problem as it's presently considered, as it's tendered by its adept to be tenderly dismissed. I will shoulder no more ballast than I've shouldered in the past, and for such callow penury I employ this confirmation as a countenance. I'm not capable of holding any more than I do now, as little as that may seem, as it's been disclosed as having been disclosed. For the fullness I can barely brace my equilibrium against, as a swimmer in the riptide thinks to jump into the sky by pushing off against a wave, but succeeds only in surfacing for one last gasp. What difference if I answer the concerns of my admirers or bow to the befuddlements with which those same degenerates are generally rebuffed? What difference when not a one has lent an ear in deference or defiance, let alone proved precedent for those I've asked to join me on this secondary pass? I'll give up what I can, which is to say, what I must. Everything that would preclude my burst into the vault had I successfully prevented its release. I don't know how to do some other than I have, and still do what I do with such skilled diligence, such rigorous attention to detail. Confronted with what otherwise parades as the abstraction of totality from this gathering of vestiges and scraps. I'm not making myself clear. I feel certain of it. Though why I should care, well, I don't know why I care, or to whom I could conceivably direct this vague rebuke. As though I've ever known or followed rules of commutation of commonplace and common parlance, understood as real by being set apart. I admit only of those bounds I'm given to transgress, pursuing nothing more than what excites the indignation of my audience of ghosts. Or perhaps that's too strong. Though I may indeed exaggerate with obloquy and emphasis, it's a ploy by which I mean no disrespect, which is precisely my conviction, my presumption, my intent, that while I strive to avoid insolence, I have no way of knowing if I've given that impression in any singular disclosure, nor how such knowledge might correct the course of my demurrals, allowing the prospective consolation of some imminent assent. I don't allege I've managed the success of all this pleasured speech and flim-flam exposition by hearing the complaints of those among my cohort in my cast. There are none of them as far as I can make the case, or rather, there may be none or there may be many, having recognized no method to pursue the calculation from my guaranteed position as an exile to the view of its receipt. That's the most important claim, the gist of this digression, of its intrusive reach. I have no way of knowing, of directing or detecting the affections of my comrades on this pilgrimage from flattery to disregard to subtle imprecation, even those I have gathered by this predicate decretum of a glance. An imaginary cohort is not so much made up of individuals, nor of subjects roused to manifest such individuation, in general or particular, in total or in part. They are nothing to me, I confess. Each is but the equal of every other, which is to say, no catalogue of incidental qualia will follow this remainder, applied as some collage upon. An alter always equal to the order of that thinking, a thought yet deprived the fixed displacement of its object, but a thought nonetheless, or nothing more, never but that nothing more. They are only as an absence, and by no insult or indifference do I make haste in constructing these insuperable boundaries again. They are nothing to me because, well, if I must say, to admit the obvious, but still, they are nothing to me because they are nothing. They simply are not there, as far as I can tell, or if they are, I don't know how to differ one from any other, one from none, by hook or by crook, by reason or encounter. I can't find a single variance between those since purported to be yesterday's arrivals and any who would spell this hapless drift across the morrow. They can't appear participants within the same enclosure. Out of time they are, though I suspect the figure of the exile from all temporal unfolding is more ably drawn by some harmonic syndicate of amiable countenance spread across its transcendental mantle, as I am most well suited to reside within the breach. The rejoinder thus inspirited by any fitful stimulus but the flesh of the word I tell, by this tell of a tale, the trailing flaccid rudder of a wake whose jesting braille indites this requiem of lunges and reversals, is neither sacred nor profane, neither clear nor distinct. And why employ a practice or repudiate a failing if such method won't result in a discernible departure from our dispatch to the finish, our cascade to the brink? All I mean to say is that I mean to now say something else. Something other than I do say, than I have said, than I will, and though it may prove provocation to persist with this affinity, with consistently rejecting all consistency of goal, such imperative is a reflex to precision, to coherence, and will repeat no matter the remonstrance of its bearer to the contrary. I conceive it as a natural right, a mythic covenant. If I appear the patsy when presented to so many better suited to the barb, at least it may protect me from their amorous advances, as they present a multitude of plucked and powdered carcasses without character for remaining without characterization. Perhaps I have lost something in the bargain. The hesitations of the furtive glance, the pitying click of tongue, or the quaver of a quickened pulse, the spelter tossed as some small token of a sympathetic longing, with a value only minted by that treasury of sentiment the donor thinks benighted by misfortune. I may have given up the pleasures of gentility and wit, so many fawning interviews with sages and savants, but the privation is compensated by the untold torments such absence of inquiry has spared me in response. It is a speculative gain, I am aware, but the loss is equally speculative, and I have more faith in the former than the latter. I'm confident of skipping every second in the sequence, though without a first. I'm certain the encounter only represents a pleasure by conceding an awareness of its corollary absence, the affectation of benevolence, through which I might forswear the hate more commonly performed in aid to this averred velleity. And as such, I encourage every instance in oppose, each one deliquescing into some amalgamation of bone and flesh and vestment, as spring buds hanging from an arcing willow spied from miles off. I don't know why I have so tediously eluded the enchantments of this secondary characterization, of portraying you in all your glorious defenses, by deducing what your vigilant attendance to the passage of this fragment makes apparent, even as I plead for a reciprocal declension in the crossing of that oceanic gorge. What could it mean, that is to say? What could it mean to say when this conclusive declaration of my terms reveals I'm unaware of any patronage at any time thought present or to come, that I don't even pretend to know by whom this marketplace of distillate abductions could be fittingly attended or systematically returned? I mean to say, I say, and by the saying certify the practice as performed. But to whom do I say it? To what but the interstices of nebulous avidity I've pronounced the absence of all sentience and subject? How could I apply this censure to them all, to all I think they are, and yet presume the saying a superfluous indulgence for having said as much already, or no, I begin to confuse even myself. I have said what I have said, and having said it, say no further in defense of such remarks. And if I'd settled on the impulse, I declare without remorse, I'd have remedied the trouble by excision or abstraction. In any case, once and for all. It's possible I've done just that, as I've readily acknowledged, though the reminder of the always present prospect of the faint might still be salutary now. That's what's so perplexing, the sum I've never figured, what I've always failed to figure out by this labor of disfigurement. Who it is I've minded that I might once again envision the incitement to remind. Have I not made arguments to the contrary? And to whom, for what, do I allow this inquisition to intrude upon the blackout days its prosody elicits? To whom or what do I address this question? Who this interloper, who this quid nunc borrower I invite to iteration by pretending to dismiss? If I understand my prospects as divergent from all servitude, or thought I might elude the discontent of this control, then surely I would push my shriven verbiage beyond the reach of any metered ornament or dulcet thrall. Each utterance of the kind, every anomalous declamation or apportioned share, trips over the dissonance of some related query, unanswered not for emphasis or sympathy, not for the emphasis of sympathy, but for having been passed over as the second left to slumber, while the Godhead reaps the life of the firstborn. Enough. I must go on to something. I must go if I have, and if I must have, then I will. Is all our reportage reports that reportage reports. But the same again is not enough, for being always more than, formed in excess, is the general superfluity of any given leitmotif to its prevailing plot. And I long ago dismissed the impulse to indulge the sham abundance promised by such ill-conceived residua, let alone to think the backlog as a fable or roman à clef. It's not too late. I could still make that choice, even while my ongoing obsession with the sentiment proves its implications understood before expression. It has not stopped me yet, or it will not again, I don't know which. If I must go on, perhaps I have. And might propose another similar erasure. Whether I have ever done, will ever do, in the activity of defacement, soon to be remembered prior to its having been. Perhaps I have gone on, if I must. Perhaps I will again, if I have. It's a safe bet I'll do something, to spite my desire, my need really, for a portion always other, always outside, always else, for the nothing that each otherwise must be and must have been, if I am to soon account for this elusive satisfaction. If I am to soon account for any such accounting, to follow through, to make the case for all these failed attempts. If anything might carry us from takeoff through to landing, then it's sure to greet my notice just as soon as we prevent this lurching onslaught of remissions from impeding our attention to the slipstream and the dross. I think I'm simply resting, the better to act when the time comes, or for no reason, to act for no reason. Better to act from stillness than from motion, but as motion seems to be our lot, I encourage you to reckon this diversion as a mode of creeping forward, of reaching for the terminus at which we're forced to part. A strange pain, the pain of crossing over, of moving past in lieu of steadying against. And I soon fear myself powerless to do anything ever again. It sometimes happens that we're punished for our faults by hazards and uncertainties, pleasures and inducements, in the causation of which these faults had no share. And yet I have received the most severe response to my persistence, to the error of surrender to such purposes before. In our passion for fulfillment, we will never reverse course. We make detours, we go by side roads. We see the straight highway before us, but know we cannot use it because it's always permanently closed. The same redacted motive inscribed within another stopgap figure doesn't signify a second or third time with equal force. For all causal relation is decided by propinquity, regardless of its impacts on the chain of chance or choice. The secret is we have only to wait without doing anything. Without going anywhere, we will always find the shape and fill the hole the flailing burnout of our meekness and our animus leaves in payment for the damages we've wrought. And while I'll grant to those of you who've managed to stay with me through the challenges and fumbles of this second masquerade that something new may follow in the wake of its conclusion, such as I may feel obliged to render for the sake of your well wishes while risking your attrition from some forthcoming stampede, yet I feel powerless to promise any third expedition or sally in the future, realizing the two I've already made are sufficient for the purpose of causing but a little stir, some tiny subsidence or upheaval to start things off, the whole fabric infected, spread to every venture in conception or commencement in the middle or the end. I've set the ball a-rolling, and so doing I discharge my want, giving good counsel to all who bear ill will to my endeavors, and expecting no divergence in the view or volubility of the same. In times of scarcity, one may resort to catching songbirds, but once in hand, one realizes they're worthless as a dinner fare, that they present the marrow of a voice and nothing more. I shall remain satisfied, no less, and proud to have been the first of any scribe to have enjoyed the fruits of my work as wholly as one could desire, in absolute fulfillment of its guiding light and principles, none of which has been greater than to deliver over to the detestation of humankind the false and foolish provinces of narrative and character, even now teetering on complete collapse, and doubtless doomed to fall forevermore as soon as I've laid down my pen. Still, I would implore you to forgive my having carrying through with all the threat and menace of this intimate remittance, searching for or seeking out. What else, I say, but a sign of life, a ransom note, a reason to keep with you while you ready your departure, despite your heated promise that you're coming back. You know as well as anyone the bane of having given up too soon, perhaps too soon to mention, before you stumbled over this accretion of erasures and its auspices of ongoing mistakes. And still I carry on with such a sin against the silence that enfolds us, knowing it will come again, regardless of the anger or indifference with which we further prosecute some manner of resistance or revolt. I'll continue on long after my continuance has ended, and will only cease to do so, or will only ever have done, when you return to find this disquisition where you left it, in the margins. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee what? Am I words among words, or silence in the midst of silence? This is the troubling adventure that besieges our companionable egress, and has done from our meeting and arrival, no less so for myself, in noticing my words are always different, even in their repetition, but my silences in this moment to the next, each singularly specified by reference to the nattering that surrounds it, are always indiscernibly comprised of the same predicates, and are indeed for all intents and purposes identical, no matter what or how or where the last. My silences are silent, they are plural in the singular and singular en masse. The silences will come, as will the silence, it never left, but one will be aware of it, of them, that will prove the difference from one moment to the next. Unless it's the final silence, which it always is, always this time when it's coming, never after it's progressed. If it didn't promise to end, to take the place of all that would define it by a sudden interruption of the breath, then there would only be this voice, my voice for all eternity, its mewl and howl and gasp, its convulsive clink and jangle, its litany of answers to a question never asked, and finally its proffer of a rattle and a plectrum, the frenzy of an utterance, a melody, a contraction and recovery, between beginning and ending, gaining ground, losing ground, getting lost, but somehow in the long run making headway towards a stasis that resembles a concern for truth. Such ideal reversion to the warrant of similitude, to everything that intimates its likeness to the real, bespeaks of an obtainable conclusion in resemblance. But that won't draw the referent any nearer to its purpose, and by further supplication to this prison of dismissals, I vow only to rebalance on that figural escarpment as a salvo in surrender, or a conquest by retreat. It's not as if I might go on and then somehow I haven't. It's not as if I could continue but decide I won't. Why, after all, would I think I must if I don't think I have? What reason to repeat the mantra, to chant it every time I take on something else? The quicker I do it, the quicker it will be done. Let others make their choices. The quicker, the better, the nearer the end. So the waning light expires, while in the darkness that ensues, we fall away into the shadows. Here and there, true to their place, if not their patterns, swing sterile planets tethered to the sky, extinguished by exhaustion or by such cunning occupants as the heat of life annoyed, who wanted to sleep in their sheds and boxes, their woods and moats and caverns, as those who would not wake again, or hitch their abdication to the banquet of the shine. No need to be far, no need to be near, without pity or scruple, fecund and barren and uncertain at the same time, to bear, then spark, then drive to ruin, in order to rise from the usual murmurs. In practice, to dream where I am is a place, the last place. The dream of place is the last place, the final placement. And the spent world, in tranquility and rancor, it isn't word, it isn't flesh, the artifice of defacers. I'll begin again before. Thank you.